Welcome to Corpse Club, the official podcast of dailydead.com. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jonathan James, and today I'm joined by Bryan Christopher and Derek Anderson. We are excited to be back for another episode of Corpse Club, diving into the things that we've recently watched, whether it be in theaters or be on streaming. You know, it's 2022, and there is so much to be excited for. There's still, in some cases, things we're catching up on from 2021, but we're going to talk about some new releases, some very new releases, and some of the topics for this episode are going to include talking about Wolf Like Me, The Deep House, and Peacemaker, among other things. And so I think, we're going to go around the room. I'm extremely excited to hear about Wolf Like Me. It's one of a number of shows that have been a little under the radar. And I remember that, Bryan recently caught it and was like, hey, like you need to watch this. And of course, I haven't seen it yet. but it's cool because all of us have, and I know so many people, whether it's on Corpse Club, the episode itself, or whether it's after this, like we rely on each other to be like, hey, like you really need to check this out, because we're at a time in entertainment where there are just so many great releases. And so we hope we can give you some recommendations and put some things on your radar. And so, Bryan, tell us what you thought about Wolf Like Me and why we should check it out.
So here's the thing about these jerks at Peacock. They totally suckered me in with the buying the monthly subscription just so that I could see Halloween Kills, at which point I went, oh, well, then, I'll just watch it. I'll cancel the subscription. And then basically I get to watch Halloween Kills for $5, call it a day. And then I kept watching stuff, and I've continued to subscribe since, when did this come out? October. So yeah, I was Peacock's, I think, like core target audience in terms of ringing me in or hooking me in with Halloween Kills and then just staying on. But I'm glad I did because yeah, the show Wolf Like Me was one that intrigued me when I first saw previews for it for a couple of different reasons. First of which is that it is written and directed by Abe Forsyth, who you might know from the movie Little Monsters. And this isn't the 1989 Fred Savage one. This is the much more recent 2019 movie with Lupita Nyong'o and Josh Gad.
Yeah, and that's a really good one. And again, an underseen movie. I think it's a Hulu exclusive, if I'm at least in terms of streaming, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. Yeah. If I remember correctly, that's where I caught it. And so, yeah, this is interesting too, because it's a little bit of a different direction. Little Monsters was kind of over the top zombie comedy. And this kind of reins it in a little bit in a lot of different ways. It stars Josh Gad, who is also in Little Monsters. And I know there's a lot of like mixed feelings about Josh Gad, just in terms of a lot of his characters can be a little bit much. I actually like kind of the over the top characters that he usually plays. I've liked him ever since he was in the Book of Mormon. And so I am interested in the idea of him being in something that's a little bit more subdued, though, which is exactly what this is. So he plays Gary, who is a widower trying to take care of his daughter, Emma, played by Ariel Donahue. And it's kind of not going great. He is, doing the best he can to be the dad that she needs, but she's suffering panic attacks. They're not really connecting emotionally. And it's just, he's kind of hanging on by a thread. And they get into this car accident with a woman named Mary, played by Isla Fisher, who almost immediately after the accident is able to establish a rapport with Emma. And she's able to calm her down from a possible panic attack. And there's just an obvious kind of chemistry between just her and Emma in terms of like they have a good rapport, and then Gary and Gary and Mary both have a good chemistry together. But kind of the wrinkle is that Mary keeps running away from him, and I don't mean that in like a figurative sense. If you've seen the trailer, you've seen like she'll be in the middle of a conversation and she will literally just get up and start running away. And you'll see where it's going pretty quickly by the trailers and by the fact that the show is called Wolf Like Me. I'll just say it. This is a werewolf story. But it is a very quiet, kind of subdued werewolf story. It isn't really, it's not leaning nearly as hard into like the transformation tropes or the special effects. It's just more about this relationship between these three people and kind of how that is a really big wrinkle in their ability to kind of come together as this potential new family. And it's very quiet. It's very kind of, I don't think slow is the right word, but it's kind of deliberately paced. And that's even to say it's really only like they could have cut some stuff and possibly made this a movie. But I actually like, because it's 6 episodes, about a half hour each, so this could have been about, a 2.5 to 3 hour movie if they wanted to. I think making it a limited series like this was the way to go. And it's just one of those things where it's, there's nothing terribly surprising about it. It's just really well crafted. It's really well cast, and it's just smart. And it's got a lot of kind of warmth and just kind of the right amount of like humor and emotion involved. So yeah, it was really good. And I think there's a chance this might wind up on my favorites list come the end of the year.
Yeah, you mentioned that to me, and I was like, wow, I need to watch this. And I will be very soon. I mean, I'll probably watch it within the next week. So I'm super excited to check it out based on your recommendation alone. I'm like, that's enough for me. I am in a similar bucket that I subscribe to Peacock for Halloween Kills. And I never hit the unsubscribe button. There's been some stuff there. Christy watches The Office, and I do see it from time to time. They added uncut episodes of The Office. I can't always tell what the new material is in some of these episodes because I'm like, is that scene new? And Christy's like, no, that's from that's the original episode. I'm like, is that scene new? And I did it so many times, I just stopped asking because I knew clearly I couldn't tell what a new scene was versus what was something that had always been there. I digress.
Sneaky.
But I'm excited to watch something new on Peacock, and this will be it. So thank you, Bryan, for watching it and taking the risk and letting us know, because it's just, if you don't, in a lot of cases, if somebody does not see like the new show, then it gets replaced by something else, which is, takes everybody's attention. And so I imagine this will be something that will continue to kind of be under the radar. And so, we just got to keep recommending it throughout the year.
Yeah. And it's got to survive the entire year to make your favorites list too, because I'm always like, I need to keep a list because I just forget what I watched in January, February, March by the time it's December. And I just remember things from the second half of the year. So that sounds really good though. And I'm a fan of Josh Gad. Ever since seeing The Rocker with Rainn Wilson, that was one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite comedies, especially back when it came out. It was this one that we quoted a lot, and 1600 Penn with the short-lived series on NBC was another.
I remember that one.
Favorite. Yeah. And that one, he really came into his own like towards the end of the show, and it's like, oh, it's just getting going. And then it got canceled. So I'm always, and now of course his career is like really blown up since those projects. So I'm always curious to see what he's going to do next, because Little Monsters is very against type for him, that character. So this sounds like another really cool one to check out, especially because it's kind of like a Little Monsters reunion in a way.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Abe Forsyth seems to be the one to see that Josh Gad can be more than just like the goofy man-child. because, in Little Monsters, they take him in he's a much more unlikable character, not because he's, kind of over the top and obnoxious, but because he's like just a bad person.
Right.
and here it goes in a different direction where he's like a really good father, and he's, at least something approaching a normal human being. Now they give him opportunities for like to kind of come apart at the seams in different places. But it's not done in kind of like a cartoonish way that a lot of people, I think, associate with Josh Gad. So I'm going to keep banging that drum. Like, this is a role that's kind of showing that Josh Gad can do more.
Nice. That should be in the promo commercial.
Yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, I have to check that one out. But I did want to take a minute, and it came out. We talked about things that, or the fact that something like Wolf Like Me, if it's not this, if it's not a mega release, kind of, go under the radar. And there were a number of movies that got released last year through Epics, and but they're Blumhouse productions. And so one of them was The Deep House. And I just had a chance to check it out. I've been on my list to catch for a little bit. And the movies from Julian Mari and Alexander Bustillo, who did Inside and Livid and Leatherface. And so some experienced, horror directors. And honestly, I didn't know at the time that they had directed the movie because I didn't really want to see anything about this at the time. I went in blind just because I knew the concept, and that was it's about these divers that find a haunted house under the water. And I'm like, sold. And some people may be like, well, that's stupid, like a house under the water haunted, and like, but
actually, I 100% want to see this now.
It's
yes,
just by that premise alone, that sounds amazing.
It's so cool. And so, my family, my immediate family, my parents and brother and sister, they got certified as divers maybe 15 years ago. It was a while back, and they've gone on a number of trips together over the years. I did catch up maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago or so, and I got certified for diving as well. And so I've gone on a couple trips with them recently. Not too long ago, went with Christy, and she's going to get certified to dive, and it's a really cool experience. I've always loved swimming, love snorkeling, and so you and to get certified for diving, it's all about practicing safety training. It's not about practicing necessarily for, it's easy to put the gear on, but it's about practicing and being comfortable with if things go wrong. You're however many feet down. I think with your first certification, you're allowed to go like 60 feet or something like that. If you get to the more advanced level, you go to like 100. But, as you go deeper and deeper, it applies more pressure. And so you have to wait at certain points so that you don't, as you go up, if you go up too quickly, then you end up getting decompression sickness or the bends. You get put in the hospital for that. And if you don't pay attention to your air, obviously you could run out. If you go down too far and stay down too long, it has similar effects to like alcohol, where it causes disorientation and things like that. The deeper you go down, you start losing the color that you can see, and that's natural. Like as you go further down, colors start to wash out. There's lack of light, and so you learn all this cool stuff. And my sister, who's been all over the world diving, I told her about this movie. I'm like, you have to see it, and she's like, diving is my like safe place. It's my happy place. And she's easily frightened. She hates aliens. She hates ghosts, and she's like, the last thing I want to think about is ghosts in the water. I didn't ever even thought about a haunted house in the water. She's like, no. And I'm like, you have to watch this.
You've already kind of ruined it for her.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I'm like, no, I'm like, you have to watch this. And so, I will say that, I looked at, as I was looking up some details for this movie, I saw that had kind of like a middle of the road IMDb rating and, like user score. And I thought this movie was absolutely incredible. Like, we're talking about favorites. Like, hey, I saw it this year, so I don't care if it was released last year. Like, this may make my favorites list for this year. Like, I understand that, and I guess I'll provide a little more context in the plot. You have these this couple, and they're like YouTubers, like vloggers, and we see them, like, they record a haunted house they go to, and then we see them a little bit later, and they're trying to find a place, and they eventually end up in this lake where they hear that there's a house that had been submerged, or like a town. I don't remember if it's like a dam that they had to let go or whatever, but and this is based in real life. There's places, I know there's some places around the world where, like, they're like I said, there's that town ends up being underwater, or a house, or whatever the case is. So it is kind of based on real life, and I don't know the exact background of how much, like, this actual place. I do assume that it was an actual house that they went into, and that they didn't, like, flood it in a set. I could be mistaken, but the point is that this is actually something that you could dive to if you wanted to. You could find it, and they do have to provide some background info. Like, as a certified diver, like, you look for cool places to dive. So, like, it's really realistic. If you'll look for like in Hawaii, there's ships that you can dive into, and there's like all kinds of like little things that, like, divers don't just want to do what people who snorkel do. They want to continue to push themselves and, like, find caves and like I said, and find sunken ships and whatnot. So, like, if you told me there was a house I could go to, I'd be like, hell yes. And if somebody said, well, it might be haunted, I'd still be like, I'm still going. And so this couple goes to this house under the water, and they got their cameras, and it's a mix of, like, found footage and not. So they don't really care about keeping to the found footage, and I think it's for the better. But things start going, weirder and weirder, and as they go into the house, they start finding more and more. And I'm purposely not going to tell anybody what happens, but holy shit, it's really cool what they were able to do. And so you have to imagine, you think about, you can have double tanks, or you can have tanks that allow you to, it's called nitrox, that allows you to kind of stay under longer. And, but that being said, you can only stay underwater for so long. And so you can imagine that the teams that are filming this, it's like, we're going to go down for about an hour. We got to make sure that all the safety measures are in place. And we got to try to film a haunted house movie, which is difficult enough to pull off because, again, they're so formulaic these days. But now we have to figure out how to make it cool and interesting and scary underwater with divers, while, the actual camera crew and safety crew and all that stuff are underwater as well. It is an incredible accomplishment. I think it's super, super effective. I think the scares are great. I think the way they handle a lot of the stuff that they do is fantastic. I can understand if you watch it, that some people may be like, we're looking for a little more from the story, or maybe we're looking for a little more gore, but, like, they're underwater, and it's really, really cool. So I really loved it. I'd highly recommend it. It's available on VOD. I'm sure Epix has it through maybe their on-demand service, or maybe their station. But I know I just bought it on Amazon. I'm like I'm going to buy this movie.
Well, speaking of the idea of, like, how long you can be under, and what that was like for shooting, I'm just kind of thinking of it narratively. Like, is this something that, like, is this a movie that takes place in real time, in terms of, like, it's over the course of, like, a 90-minute period, or however long the movie is? Like, is that how long is actually progressing? Because I'm just thinking about, like, the narrative logistics of, how long would a tank last?
That's an excellent question. Yes, there is a ticking clock element in this, because to your point, they only have about an hour of air.
Okay.
So you have your intro, and then the movie takes place over the course of that time. Now, did they sync up minute to minute? I don't know if it's exact. It's pretty close.
No, but I love the idea that this is, like, the haunted house is taking place over the course of an hour. Like when you think about haunted houses, it's usually something that they draw out, over the course of days. Like little things start to happen, and then and I'm sure over the course of the runtime of the film, they'll tease stuff out. But I like the idea that the encounter with this haunted house, can't be something that's taking place over weeks because they're only down there for an hour.
Yeah. It's like I said, I think it's super clever, and just again, I just don't want to give anything away because I know so few people have seen it. Otherwise, I would love to talk more about some of this. But they have to come up with some real creative ways to make things look eerie or supernatural. And there's even staging this house, right? It's under the water. So you have to stage it to look creepy and to have that stuff last. And then just imagining like the logistics of filming this. Yes, exactly. Lighting it. And then also making sure that things are cohesive between takes. So like you can imagine like set dressing, like those things, can move under the water. So you have to you have all these new challenges. So, I am not a filmmaker, but I can just imagine the challenges that filmmakers would have to go through to make this look convincing. And I think they knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. Even to film like a scene underwater can be time consuming, let alone almost an entire movie. But I really need to see this too, because I loved like 47 meters down and how they really kind of got into the diving details in that movie and how that was a major factor of the story. But then too, it's like usually when you have a thriller or a horror movie underwater, it feels like 9 times out of 10, the threat is like a shark. And unless the plot twist of this is that a shark is actually the mastermind behind the haunted house, a la Deep Blue Sea or something like that. It sounds like this is a really kind of different direction to go for the submerged subgenre in horror, which is like aquatic horror. I think that's really cool that they're just kind of did something totally different with like 2 different subgenres and then combined it into a movie where the premise alone just makes you want to watch it, because this is one where I remember when just hearing the synopsis, I was like, I need to see this movie. And like you said, stuff gets lost too if you don't really seek it out or you don't champion it. So I think I didn't really make any resolutions this year, but if I did, I think one of them would be to watch more like direct to VOD or very limited theatrical release movies, because there's so many great ones that come out that just kind of fall through the cracks with all the stuff we have to keep up with nowadays. So definitely going to be putting this one more towards the top of that to watch pile.
And also, I know a lot of people just know Bustillo and Maury from Inside, and maybe people who had seen Leatherface were maybe a little bit lukewarm on kind of where they were going. But I think if you've seen the movie they made just before this, Candicia, they're definitely, they're not a one-hit wonder in terms of Inside. Candicia is actually another one that made my favorites list last year. And so, they've definitely got the chops to kind of explore other areas outside of the new French extremity. So, for anybody who hasn't seen Candicia, that just a small side tangent, that is, I kind of almost see it as like, it's kind of Candyman esque in terms of it takes place in kind of a working class, poorer neighborhood in Paris. And it's revolves around the Candicia, which is a demon from Moroccan mythology. And it's really, really well done. It kind of brings that, folklore element into an urban setting. Again, similar to the way they do in Candyman, but I think they add enough different new elements to it that it makes it into something else. So they've got some different tricks in their bag. So I think, with that, I'm really, really excited to see what the Deep House is going to bring, because I really love this premise. So I can't wait to check it out.
Yeah, I hope you guys like it. And then, for anybody who's listening, like if you've ever gone diving, like this is a must watch. Put it at the top of your list. For anybody else, put it high up on your list. It's a lot of fun, and especially if you're a filmmaker. If you're a filmmaker, also like if you're a filmmaker, if you're interested in making horror movies, just to see like again, just imagine the challenges that they had to go through to execute some of this stuff. It's just technically it's impressive, and the movie's a lot of fun as well. So yeah, we'll move on to Derek, and what have you caught up on recently? I know there's a couple things.
Yeah, one of them is quite recent release at the time of this recording. That would be the new Scream movie, which I do wish it was available to stream simultaneously, like if it had an HBO Max arrangement or something like that. But I got the booster shot. I bundled up in a KN95 mask, and I wasn't going to be seeing anyone immediately in the near future after seeing the movie that is immunocompromised. So I felt I took and to the theater and saw the new Scream, but I suggest totally cool. Obviously, if a lot of horror fans are waiting to see this one, and also would suggest not seeing it unless you feel like it's a safe situation just with COVID and everything, because we're still very much in the thick of that. But I am glad. I did have a great time watching the movie itself. The Scream franchise for me is kind of one of those franchises where I go through periods where I'm really obsessed over it. Like I just adore the franchise as a whole, especially those like first two movies with Randy, who's like one of my favorite horror movie characters, and just that whole world that they've created is something very familiar and almost comforting to me. Just kind of how they've been able to do a very straightforward storyline through all those films without having like 10 different alternate universe situations going on. But so that being said, I was really excited to see this one, and I think it really did not disappoint. I feel like they did a great job. The Radio Silence filmmaking team, they did a great job delivering something that was new, but also honored the past. I think what they really pulled off was, even though we see some of the legacy characters returning, like we have Neve Campbell, we have David Arquette and Courtney Cox returning, it's really still the movie for the new characters and the new generation. So they are able to kind of pass that torch in a way where it feels like it's still a fresh story while honoring the past and making it feel like they are moving it in a direction that makes sense for all these new characters, and that they're just not there to be killed off, so that Sydney can come in and save the day, and then it becomes her movie. It's always about these new characters. They're kind of at the forefront, but the past very much dictates where this story goes, and I won't get into spoilers with that, but I think they just did a really good job balancing some of those expectations, and fandom and everything is very, very much something that is a meta aspect of this story. So I think it's very clever. It's got some really, really clever kills, and I think they play with expectations really well. And it might be the most meta Scream yet, which is really saying something. So I feel like there's a lot to love in the new one. They took some really big swings. They maybe don't connect on it for everybody, but I think they did a good job kind of honoring this world that Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson built. And there's a lot of great nods to Wes Craven and in the movie. And I feel like it's kind of the best of both worlds. So if they never make another one, I think it's a strong note to end on, but I think the box office numbers will dictate that it's only a matter of time before Ghostface returns. But in the meantime, this was a good new installment after after 10 years. So it was enjoyable overall.
Yeah, I'm looking, this sucker's already at $86.7 million. So I can't see them not making another one. I'm interested, this is obviously the first post Wes Craven installment, and it was taken over in terms of directing duties by the Radio Silence guys, Matt Bettinelli, Olpin, and Tyler Gillette. And do you get a sense of like, I don't know if I'm guessing you've seen Ready or Not. Do you get a sense that they're bringing their kind of personality and sensibilities into it? Like, is there, do you get the sense that they're making it their own? I know it's a tight thing to kind of walk in terms of, you'll get people who, if you go too far out of the lines, then you're going to get people kind of, yelling about kind of, pissing all over Wes Craven's legacy with the series. But if you stay too far in the lines, then it's why did you bother? So it's a tricky tightrope. So I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on how well they walk that.
I think they walked it really well, and I think they're really conscious of how under a microscope they would be. And this is kind of the first movie for them coming into a pre-existing IP like this, where they do have all that pressure. But I think they actually like take all of that pressure and they utilize it in a way that injects the story with even more like fun. And I feel like they never lose sight of what a Scream movie should be. And so I think they do definitely put their own stamp on it. And it's a very playful movie. Like it never feels too dark, but it's also not quite a comedy either. But there is a lot more, I guess, lighthearted, like meta horror moments than even I expected for a Scream movie. So I think they very cleverly like use that to their advantage without and tried to honor Wes Craven, but then also still do their own thing, which they're obviously very good at themselves. And I think that people that like the pre-existing work will come into this and still be able to see their fingerprints on it. And although it's kind of their version, it's almost like if they made a Scream movie, like in their vision, not quite a fan film, but just their kind of version of that. So I think you definitely can still see that. And it was no easy task, I'm sure, because a Scream is so, I mean, it's not an easy one to pull off, and you're never going to please everybody, but I think they did a really good job of using that to their advantage.
I'm very excited to watch this when it comes to VOD. I'm in the same boat that a lot of people are, and I've been able to keep away from spoilers. And thank you, Derek, for not spoiling anything. Although I'll survive with the occasional spoiler. I've had to soften my stance. I don't know if you call it a stance, but I've softened on spoilers because it's unavoidable. So I'm like, I can't change these things, especially because like I have to be on social media. I'm gonna see Spider-Man spoilers. I'm gonna see.
Yeah, I was gonna
spoilers.
Say how well have you been fending off the Spider-Man spoilers?
I've muted I might have even said this last time, but I've muted everything that I could think of related to Spider-Man. But stupid Twitter, just like when they have their like top trending things, they ignore it. If it's an advertisement, they ignore it. If they're recommending it, they ignore it. It's like muted words, as I understand it today on my app, I believe it only mutes things that are popping into your like, I don't even know what they call it, but like your activity feed, like with the alarm. But if you go to the homepage where they give you recommended things, that doesn't filter out your muted words. It doesn't, at least on my app. So
what you're saying is it's absolutely useless.
It's like half useful. I'll give that. It's like half, but not in any ways that matter. So anyway, but I've been good with Scream so far. But now we have basically, I think we have about 60-day windows is what it's looking like. So I got another like 30, 45 days for Scream, I think, before we can see it on VOD. That's my guess anyway. But yeah, I'm very excited to check it out. I'm super happy for people who liked it and got a chance to see it. And I'm excited it's doing well at the box office, and means we'll probably get some more. And so it's cool all around. But I'm like I said, I'm excited to see it myself soon.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's I think it's only, and I know that the Radio Silence guys have, said they'd come back in a heartbeat, and there are concepts out there for future installments. So I'm sure we'll get to Scream 10 before you know it.
Yeah, might happen. But yeah, we're back to Bryan, and Bryan, I don't actually remember what you're going to talk about. Oh, I do remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what have you been up to lately, Bryan?
We're going to go into the world of video games, and we're going to go. This is actually not one that came out recently. It's been out for several years, but I think this is the episode where I just prove myself to be like an utter mark for various like marketing gimmicks and tricks like that, because we've already admitted that like I've been watching Peacock since October just because of Halloween Kills, and now I'm going to admit that I've recently gotten into Dead by Daylight, and anybody who knows me knows that I am a huge Hellraiser fan. And as soon as they started, releasing trailers for the fact that they were going to be having a Pinhead downloadable character, that was only a matter of time before I was going to buy this game and check it out. The irony is that I never use the Pinhead downloadable content. For those who are unfamiliar with Dead by Daylight, it is what's known as a asymmetric survival horror video game. So it's actually similar to, well, I guess it predates. So Friday the 13th, the video game, I think from what I gather is a similar format where four of you are playing survivors, and one of you is playing a killer, and you are left on this map. The premise in the game is that there's this being known as the entity that kind of plucks people from wherever they're living and puts them in this quasi alternate universe where they're subjected to kind of continual loops of being put in a situation where they are chased down and hunted by a killer and sacrificed to this entity. And it's kind of one of those things where the whole ritual and the process is part of it. So there's actually some shades of like Cabin in the Woods in there. And so you can either play as one of the four survivors, where you are trying to, you're locked into this compound. So there are various maps. So you might be, in this kind of wooded area, or you might be in the like an elementary school, or in some cases they've started incorporating known areas. So like Silent Hill, there's all kinds of different maps in there. And so, but the basic objectives are always the same. If you're a survivor, you are trying to you're trying to start generators that are just placed throughout the map, and you are trying to get enough of them started that you can open the gate and escape. The big wrinkle is that someone is also playing a killer who is going around and trying to slash you to the point where you are unable to defend yourself. The killer will then hang you on a hook and leave you there to be sacrificed to the entity. So basically, this all plays like a very kind of sophisticated game and violent game of capture the flag, where you're trying to get these objectives done while avoiding being quote unquote tug, aka stabbed, slashed, killed in some fashion and hung on a hook. I was a little skeptical when I first started this game, basically because it is a game that like there's no single player version, like there's no like storyline or anything like that. It is just these online games where you get plugged in. If you have enough people, you can start a kind of a unique group where you can just play with your friends. But if you're just playing by yourself, you're just going to get randomly put in with other randos. And so I've had I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with those kinds of things. In a non-horror mode, I used to play something called Rocket League, which it got to the point where I actually had to stop playing because I was told in no uncertain terms that like my wife did not like the person I was becoming when I was playing that game. I got very, very frustrated. And it was something where I was getting frustrated about the idea of a giant car not being able to hit the ball the way it wanted it to. I think there was some element of like knowing that there were other people on the other end of these games that were probably laughing at me for not being able to do this. So I was worried that frustration was going to carry over to this. As it turns out though, while I'm still not, I don't think very, very good at it, I'm definitely kind of getting into the groove, at least of being a survivor. I'm terrible at being a killer. It's kind of one of those things where, being the survivor is a lot more about, there's more of you than there are of the killer. So if you're good at kind of like staying out of the way, doing your own thing, getting the generators going, like you can make a pretty good run of it. If you're the killer, I always feel like the kid who's like they're playing keep away, and like you're like the monkey in the middle, and they're like throwing the ball over you because the people I'm playing with as survivors are really good, or I'm just really bad. I don't know. Either way, probably a little from column A, a little from column B. And so it's one of those things where it's like, it almost seems like there are points where the survivors will actually like run up to me and start running around me because they know that I don't play this game well enough to actually kill them. And so they'll turn on all the generators, they'll open the gates to escape, but then they'll just stand at the gate and wait for me to start coming toward them, and then just kind of like give me the finger and leave. So it's, maybe they're not doing that on purpose, but I also get a sense that like they're totally doing that on purpose. All that said, it's just a really fun game, and like there's little ways to make it different. Like the different survivors have different things that they're better at, in terms of, some survivors are better at running away from the killer, so they can be the ones who will like lure them away and kind of send them on a wild goose chase. Other ones are better at like doing medic stuff where you can help heal other players. Some are better at working the generators. So and then you can like take on these little challenges where you'll get more kind of in-game currency that you use to beef up your player and get different perks and things like that, and different tools. And so there's different challenges you can do to get more of that in-game currency. So like, turning on 3 generators in one game by yourself, or healing another survivor 4 times. It's, I think part of the genius of the game is that it's such a simple premise, and it's such a simple game. It's always the same thing, but they've added enough kind of little wrinkles and things to spice it up that it keeps you wanting to come back and keeps you wanting to keep playing it.
Yeah, I need to play this. I know we've talked about it before, and I've had this game for years, and I just have never gotten around to playing it. And my friend and longtime Corpse Club listener Charlie will tell you that he's been telling me that I need to play this game for years, and there's also a mobile version too now, which he let me know about. So this has been on my to-do list for a very long time, and now I really need to now I have even more incentive to get in there, because especially it's one of those games where, even though it did come out years ago, they are so good at adding new slashers and new environments to play in, like with Halloween, Hellraiser, Stranger Things, Nightmare on Elm Street, I believe, is in there, and like feels like 100 other different horror properties that they've done. That I'm always like constantly reminded, oh man, that would be really cool. So it feels like it's almost like a new version of the game comes out like every 3 months, and I really and hearing your breakdown of it too, I'm like, that makes even more sense now. Like just how addicting that can be, like when you get into a groove and you start to figure it out a little bit.
Before we started recording, Brian and I said that we were gonna have to figure out a way to make Derek install this game. Does Charlie listens to Corpse Club from time to time?
He does, yes.
Perfect. So this way he can hear
so
it.
We've got 4.
We have it. So we have Charlie, and he can also be witness to this. So is the game still in the plastic?
Yes.
Okay. So we're gonna make a pledge here, because I just bought the game. Guess what? My game's still in plastic too. So what we're gonna do is we're going to promise on air, live as we can be, that we will unplastic our games, and we will at least put the disc in and install the patches and install it to our hard drive. I'll pledge this, Derek, within the next week. How about you?
I will pledge it as well. I just my asterisk with that is I have to make sure I have enough room on the PlayStation Drive. but I think I can make room. So
that isn't a firm commitment, but we will follow. It was. That was not the pledge I was looking for, but you're at least going to give it the college try, and that's better than you've done in the last 4 years. So I'll say that's progress, and we're going to see if there's room there. And if we have to work together as a team to remove space from your hard drive, gosh darn it, Derek, we'll figure it out. But anyway, so we will install this because we've been talking about playing it together. We've been talking about playing something together. And, I think the thing with Dead by Daylight is I felt like
platform.
That too, it's super helpful. Anybody can play and on any platform. So I think that makes it super easy. And like, years ago, I saw these cool expansions. I'm like, I think I missed the boat. Like, this is probably like the last one. And like, I feel like no other good expansions are going to come out. And then every time another one and another one and another one. And of course, like there's Hellraiser. So, it also, it made it easy for me. So we will be playing this soon. Soon it might be relative. I might be playing with Bryan faster than Derek is, but Derek and Charlie, you got an open invite. So just hit me up over email and or text Derek or send him a letter. I don't know how you talk to him. We're in a pandemic. I don't know when the last time was you saw him. So maybe letter.
And I'll also put out to our listeners, like if you're a Dead by Daylight fan and you want to link up with me, my username in the game is Evil Thick. That's Evil THICC. And I feel like that requires a little bit of explanation. So when I've tried to set up usernames through my Switch, I can't put in, like, my usual go-to for a handle is Evil Taylor Hicks, and there's not enough characters for a username to do the full thing. So I set up something that was like Evil T Hick or Evil T Hicks. And so someone who, when I was playing Rocket League, was doing like some commentary and they kept saying Evil Thick. And so I just decided to lean into that. So I just went with it. So that's kind of like a bastardization of Evil Taylor Hicks. So if you are interested, definitely reach out, friend request me. I'll definitely look to accept.
We'll just say that this is not affiliated with Corpse Club or. I'm just kidding. It was a real reasonable explanation. I thought it wasn't going to be, but if somebody else kind of gave you that nickname, then that kind of works.
Yeah, that's even better.
I was prepared for a really flimsy excuse. But no, I'm excited to play.
It's going to happen. I think it's finally going to happen.
What, that you're going to take it out of the plastic?
I think he's definitely going to take the game out of the plastic.
Whether or not he actually downloads it, I think, is the question mark.
I think 100% that he takes it out of the plastic, 50% that the disc is put into the PlayStation, and 25% chance that he has the hard drive space.
See, the thing is, my dad and I still regularly play Heroes versus Villains in Star Wars Battlefront 2. So that is like the mothership on the space is that game. So if I can work around that game, then I think we're good.
I bet you have some old games there that have like huge save files. Like, game developers weren't really cool about the size of the save files back in the day. And so some games, it would be like, this is an example. Like, this is not a real example, but like Mortal Kombat, and like your progress like took up half the hard drive. It's like, I'm like, you really need that much data, that much data for this. But it's like, I know like some role-playing games is like a real example. Some role-playing games, like those save files were huge because you had to like keep all your inventory and had to keep all your progress in like 100-hour game. And, some games were just better at optimizing it than others. So hopefully you got some things you can remove.
Yeah. Another solution would be to get my hands on a PlayStation 5.
I think that's going to take you longer. I really do. I think our best shot is to free up some space.
Yeah. I think
but I remember
that's
that
the safe bet.
On my, I don't remember what it was, Xbox
360
I
maybe.
would say the first. I almost said Xbox One, but that's not the first one. Xbox One is like the fourth one. What the hell,
Yeah,
Microsoft?
it's very confusing.
Very confusing. Anyway, the first Xbox ever released, or the one after it, the 360. Yeah, those used to fill up all the time. I'd play like Dragon Age. And it was like I'd have to remove saves so I could continue to play the game. I think that's what it was. I think it was Dragon Age. But anyway,
and then don't you just wish you could go back to memory cards? Like, wasn't that just a beautiful time? I feel like you could save so much. Of course, the graphics weren't as good, but you could save like I had a memory card for the PlayStation 1 that had like 5 different subdivisions on the memory card, and you could literally have like hundreds of saved games on there from like 50 different games. It was awesome.
Interesting. I actually never did that. I was trying to think about if I ever had a memory card, but I didn't because, obviously like you couldn't save on the Atari and the Nintendo and the original Sega. And then I kind of skipped over the first PlayStation. I did a lot of PC gaming, and then I did an Xbox. I mean, you could get an expansion hard drive or whatever, but I never did. So no, I never had backup or extra space.
I will say my the Switch still leverages an SD card if you want to get more space, and we actually just got one at like quintupled the amount of space that we could have on there. Yeah,
nice. Yeah, it's funny. When I was a kid and we had a Game Boy Advance, and me, my mom, and my sister at like Best Buy, and I was like adamant that I was like, I need a memory card because I can't I couldn't figure out how to like save my game in the game. And so I was like, they must have one. So of course I'm like too shy to go ask the employees. I'm like, hey mom, could you go and, ask for this memory card? And then he's just like, well, they don't exist. And then she's like, yeah, they don't exist, Derek. And then I was like, no, there has to be a memory card. So then she goes back. She's like, will there ever be a memory card for the Game Boy Advance? And he's like, I don't think so. And then I'm like, and then of course I go home and realize I'm just an idiot because I didn't realize that you could just, save on the actual console. And so it was, memory cards and I have quite the history.
I assume the story is from last year.
Yeah. It's been a rough couple of years.
It does sound like hard drive space filling up has been a part of your life.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and then of course the NES, you just couldn't save your game at all. So you either had to like leave the Nintendo on and turn the TV screen off and just hope that like someone didn't come by and turn the console off.
Or turn the switch the other way. If they flipped the switch and you had your NES plugged into the top outlet. Oh, no good.
I actually remember. You remember back in the day for the really old school 8-bit NES, some games, their way around that was when you'd get to a certain level, they would give you like a save code, basically. So it was like you would start again from the beginning, like you would turn it on, it would be reset, but you could put in like this code that would jump you back to a certain point in the game.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
I do remember that. And that definitely made it easier. And they did have some PC games had that as well, I think. But yeah, that was definitely an easy way around it. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking about the Nintendo games I played, and I didn't play any that were super long. I guess, I mean, I like Mario 2, you could beat that game in 30 minutes once you get through it a few times. Mario 3, if you know how to use those whistles, you can jump most of them.
Yes.
Yeah. So once otherwise it's a little bit of a pain. But so I used to play those a lot. One I did play and I never beat, but I used to love the game was Maniac Mansion. I don't know if you guys ever played that.
I just saw that at a Half Price Books, like behind the glass, and it's going for a decent amount of money.
Yeah,
and I've always wanted to play that.
I have it. I still have my old Nintendo, so I'm 99% positive I have Maniac Mansion with it. But that game was great, but I never beat it. I could never figure out the combo to get everybody out or get anybody out of the house.
Sounds a little like Friday the 13th, the game, the Nintendo game. Or it's just like super confusing trying to navigate that map.
It was, but honestly, it's a little like it's order of operation kind of moving around. So, it's maybe it's a little closer to Dead by Daylight. I'm taking us full circle. Figured out a way.
Just wait for the
listeners.
Maniac Mansion DLC for Dead by Daylight.
Also, Derek, that was the correct use of full circle.
Oh, okay. So
See, when you bring it back around to the topic that you were originally talking about, that's what full circle means.
Well, here's the thing, like for our listeners who don't know what you're talking about, and I don't remember what you're talking about. What are you guys talking about?
So this is going back to, wow, this is what, like 2-3 weeks ago. So yeah. Basically I'm the only one who cares about this because it gives me a chance to needle Derek again. But it was talking about something to do with like a film's release, and that it started at TIFF and then it made its way back to, it was released in the US, and he's like full circle, and it was like timeout.
Not good enough.
We didn't travel in a circle.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah. Now I remember. See, Derek didn't even remember.
But then I think Jonathan came in with the save and said that it came full circle back to North America.
Ah, yes.
Right. That's right.
In some cases, like a week or 2 weeks, it seems like 2 years ago. I swear my memory is so bad these days. It's bad.
Well, especially given the fact that probably nobody gave a shit about that conversation the first time around, and now I'm bringing it back.
Yeah, but like
you're back full circle to have this conversation.
This is true. Okay, we're moving on. We are moving on.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah, I'm going to switch the order a little bit because I'll end on my pick. But Derek, I will turn it over to you. And you could talk about anything you want.
Oh my gosh. Let's see, what other old video games can I conjure up?
Anything. I mean, I don't care. You could talk about something new you watch, or you could talk about any topic. You could talk about food. You could talk whatever.
Ooh.
He's going to bring up Scream again, isn't he?
You could talk about Scream 5 again.
I'm going to talk about Stab this time, Stab 8. No, which is actually quite a recurring feature in that movie for all of our Stab fans out there. But I will go with something relatively new, and it's something that both of you enjoyed and was featured on favorites lists on Daily Dead, and that is Only Murders in the Building, the mystery comedy series that's on Hulu. This was kind of a no-brainer to watch just because our family's always been a really big fan of Steve Martin and Martin Short, and we love a good whodunit. So to see them together, and then you throw in Selena Gomez and Amy Ryan, and it's just like the setting of how like these three people that are living in the same apartment building in New York are really big fans of a true crime podcast within the show that's hosted by a character played by Tina Fey. And then they stumble upon this real murder in their building and then trying to figure out what's going on. And then on top of that, they're making their own true crime podcast about them trying to solve the murder as it's happening. It's just it's so great on so many levels. We kind of devoured it in like 3 days, and it's, if you've watched it, it's the like generally half-hour-ish episodes, so it flies by really quickly. But I just loved everything about it. It was just such in our wheelhouse of that type of like quirky comedy. And then Martin Short and Steve Martin are so good together anyways. I know they've like toured together for stand-up. And then of course they, there's the SNL connection from when Steve Martin was always hosting, and Martin Short was involved with that. And so it was just such a delight and did not disappoint at all. And like you said, Brian, there's that great kind of recurring bit with Sting from the Police, who also happens to live in this building. So yeah, there's just so much to enjoy. And I really like too, how over the course of 10 episodes, like as the season goes on, you get really unique episodes where it's like different perspectives. So it really like once you get to know these central characters, then the writers take you out of their POV and then like starts to show you what this whole building and the people in it look like to other characters that originally you kind of think of as like side characters, but then they like get their own episodes. It's really, really cool how they did that. And I think, and it ended on a cliffhanger where you just had to get a season 2, which thankfully did get renewed. But I cannot wait to see where it goes next, because I just want to spend more time with those characters. So thank you guys for the recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, like, I love Steve Martin. I love Martin Short. I adore Steve Martin and Martin Short together. Like, they're one of my favorite duos. Yeah, if you've seen like their comedy special that they did together on Netflix, if you haven't seen it, see it. It's amazing, especially if you do like Only Murders in the Building, like that. The rapport that they have is just like, that's lightning in a bottle type stuff. And then the way that Selena Gomez acts as a foil for that is just absolute perfection. She's so good in it. She plays off of them so well. And it's one of those things where, in the context of the story, like, it's a trio that, like, it makes sense, you know, in the ways that it doesn't make sense. But, you know, even beyond the trio, like, everybody get their time to shine. And Derek, you know, like you were saying, we get these kind of interesting angle episodes, because like there's one episode where one of the characters is deaf. So there's very little sound design, and there is almost no spoken words in the entire episode. And they do a lot of stuff with that, like you said, where they change perspective. So it's, you know, the core trio is integral to it, but they also found really interesting ways to expand out of that.
Yeah, I can't say enough great things about this show. I recommend it to everyone. This is one of the rare shows that it doesn't matter what you're into. Like, it's hard to not find something to not only like but love about this show. It's really, really, really fantastic. So I'm eagerly awaiting season 2. I believe they're already filming it. I did see there was like an SNL bit that had Steve Martin, Martin Short together in it, and I'm like, oh, they're together, so maybe they're filming. And so hopefully we will be getting the new season by the end of the year, but TBD on that, I think. So yeah, I'm glad you got to check that out, Derek. I will call out a couple of shows that I had a chance to catch up on. Let's see. I'll start with Peacemaker. I wouldn't even say catch up on it, because it's a live show now. And I guess I'll talk about a few of them. I saw Peacemaker. If you've seen Suicide Squad and you liked Suicide Squad, the Suicide Squad, I should say, and John Cena's character, then this is a perfect show for you. It's you know, it follows his character. James Gunn created the show, directed the first few episodes, and it's everything that you'd expect from, you know, James Gunn doing a Peacemaker TV show. I would say, and I don't think it's a spoiler if you want to know nothing about the Suicide Squad, then tune out for the next 30 seconds. But like, he's a very, like, even though they have a lot of humor around his character is definitely kind of like an unlikable character. And it's, you can't really see things from his point of view. I wouldn't say in the Suicide Squad that he's one dimensional, but it's like, he certainly is a character you would never side with. And so, what the show has been able to do is show us that other side, what made him, why should I care about a Peacemaker show? And very quickly they're able to make you care about this character and make you care about a cast of characters, either that you only saw just a very little bit of, or brand new characters, and continue to peel back layers every single episode. It's funny, it's gory, it's hard R, just like the Suicide Squad. And if you haven't seen it, because it's been trending all over social media, it has one of the absolute like best openings.
It's so great.
You have to watch it. It's a dance sequence, and you just, I mean, Christy and I, you know, said the same thing. We hadn't really been on Twitter when it first aired, and then I just noticed that everybody said the exact same thing. Like, I'm never skipping this intro. And so every episode we watch it, we're like, nah, there's a skip button. We're like, nah, screw you. We're not skipping it. So yeah, it's been a joy to watch. We're 4 episodes in. It's probably our top show that we're looking forward to. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to see it, but I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I've seen the first 3 episodes. I'm 1 episode behind, but yeah, I really love this, and it's perfect casting, because if you're going to have a character that on paper is as unlikable as Peacemaker, if you want people to kind of like stick with this character, you can't do any better than hiring like such a kind of a sincere lunkhead as John Cena. Like, he's so good at playing just that like Peacemaker is not a good dude, but like the way John Cena plays him, he's more just like a misguided puppy dog. And he's just the way he is because of his upbringing, which is stuff that they hinted at in the Suicide Squad, and they're clearly going to dig deeper into with this series. And so, there's a lot of, in these initial episodes, you're either laughing at him, you are laughing in spite of him, or you're getting those kind of peeks behind the curtain where you're getting to understand him a little bit more. I also 100% understand people who are going to be like, I don't really care to see a movie where we're asked to like sympathize with a kind of like shitty conservative violent criminal, which I 100% get. But if you like James Gunn's sensibilities, you like his sense of humor, and you kind of like the kind of career pivot that John Cena has taken, where he's kind of really showing his comedic chops, that's all on full display here. And Jonathan, like you said, like the gore factor, there's any horror fan is going to be on board with the level of gore on this show.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I was very surprised when they announced this show, just because, like you guys mentioned, I mean, not the first character I would really expect to get his own show after what happens in the Suicide Squad, and where what you kind of feel about his character after all of that. But it almost feels like something where James Gunn was like dared at a party, like, I bet you can't make a show about the Peacemaker, because it just feels like it would be the hardest character to do that with. But like you said, John Cena is kind of the secret weapon, where he is so good in that role, and he brings out all these conflicted emotions with that performance, where I think maybe that makes him the perfect character for a show like this. And then having it on HBO Max, where you can pretty much do whatever you want with the gore level and the storytelling. It's kind of a match made in heaven, with just that, all those things coming together. So I definitely wouldn't mind checking it out at some point. Although that's the reason I didn't really rush to see it, is because I'm like, I'm like, I don't know if this is the character like I want to follow. But it's just interesting how with shows like The Boys and Preacher, to some extent, I know not necessarily a superhero show, but just how they're able to take these like comic book characters and do really different things with them in a very R-rated setting. It's kind of become like Kick-Ass was kind of like the first of that back in the day, and now they've really embraced that as its own like entire genre. So it's been really interesting to see this kind of I guess you could call it an evolution of the superhero genre to some extent.
Yeah, back to what you mentioned about a dare. I think James Gunn kind of dared himself, as I understand. He wrote it during quarantine, during the pandemic over the last 2 years, and the show hadn't been greenlight. He hadn't been paid for it, so he's just like, well, what can I do? And this came of it, and yeah, I can understand. I talked about specifically last year about how it was really tough for me to watch anything that was super heavy, and so I mean, I get if people are like, hey, this isn't really for me. Why I find this fascinating in James Gunn's career in general is he takes these unknown, unlikable, the undesirable characters, and he's able to make them interesting and mine them. And it's just such a fascinating. He has just such a fascinating mind that is able to say, I can work with kind of any. He could work with kind of any DC character he wants. He has Harley Quinn, who a lot of people would. That's what their focus would be. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to create so much, story and so much and I'm going to develop Peacemaker so much when most people don't even know who Peacemaker is, that I'm going to be able to give him his own TV show. And so, yeah, it's been great to watch. It's 8 episodes. And so I think we're at the halfway mark. Episode 5 is going to be coming out, or it will be out by the time our listeners hear this episode. So yeah, so that's been good. And then the other 2 shows I've been catching up on is I've seen all of The Witcher season 2, and I don't know if you guys saw season 1, but I finished season 2. I thought season 1 was pretty good. I had fun with it. I really like Henry Cavill. I really like the cast, and the actress that plays Yennefer, her name escapes me right now. I apologize, but I thought there was a lot of interesting things going on, but the story really was diverged in the way they were dealing kind of with time and splitting the story. It kind of felt disjointed. I think that was generally, some of the criticisms around that. So this one's a lot more straightforward, and I think to the show's benefit. I also think the show maybe leans into a little bit more of the campiness and the monster fighting side. I think the show has maybe a little bit of a struggle with they're coming after Game of Thrones. So there's an expectation about this deeper, political maneuvering, but at the same time, it's based on a book series, but also a video game series. So there are these people who want these video game elements. So I think some of this in some ways kind of clashes, but I think they find a better mix in season 2. I certainly had a lot of fun with it, and they already were renewed for the 3rd season. So I would say if you liked the first season, you'll probably like the second one. If you saw the first season, I don't know, then maybe wait to see what happens with season 3. But I think it was worth my time, and it was, it's I guess what something that I said about it is that it kind of is maybe a show that you would see on Sci-Fi, but it has the budget of Game of Thrones, and so
Oh, wow.
and that's not a. And so, and I kind of laugh while I say it too. And I know you did too, Brian, and it's not in a bad way. It's imagine if they gave, somebody who wanted to make something really, kind of campy, but they had an unlimited budget to do it. And I think that's kind of what we're getting here with this. And like I said, I don't mean that as a knock on anybody involved with it. I just think it has like I said, an interesting mix where it has this level of campiness and fun, but also can be very serious. And we didn't see things like that when it comes to Game of Thrones, and we didn't see things like that really when it came to Lord of the Rings. So we don't really have anything of this budget and scale that kind of treats the material this way.
And to be honest, and I've seen about a season and a half. I'm about halfway through the 2nd season. I tend to do this one in spurts where I'll start watching it and I'll watch a bunch of episodes in a day. And then maybe a few months will go by before I go back and finish anymore. But Jonathan, I agree 100%. And in terms of that sci-fi comparison, and I think that is not at all a disparagement, because it actually thrives better when it's playing up the silly factor and not really getting it's when they try and do more of that big picture stuff that they start to lose me, because I frankly don't care. And part of that is I think also personal preference, because it's also an issue that I have with The Expanse. And I know The Expanse is it's just about universally loved. But when it comes to storylines in The Expanse, I like more of because they had a few different threads going at the beginning of the series where, there was one where it was a private detective who was doing this missing girl case. But then a lot of the show becomes more about the kind of macro political maneuverings and things that are going on. And political sabotage and all that kind of stuff. And I really tend to really gravitate more towards those smaller stories. And that's kind of the same thing here. Like, I really like, my favorite episodes of The Witcher are the ones that are kind of the smaller one-off, like the side quests. And then sometimes when you're getting back to that more like, the larger world building and things where it's got that more kind of larger universe implications, or universe of the show implications, that I kind of lose interest. So yeah, I'd like to. I know they have to balance that line because they want to kind of please and bring in as many people as possible. But yeah, I think they're at their best when they're telling the smaller, like, episode of the week stories.
Yeah, I think definitely like the weirder the better with a lot of this stuff. But it's been fun. So yeah, I'm excited. As soon as season 3 comes out, I will be watching it.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things, and I love we were just watching like Red Sonja, and just I love that sword and sorcery, like Conan the Barbarian style story telling. So I think this would be right up that alley. And then, like you said, with that kind of storytelling, but with a modern day, like, massive budget, that just sounds really, really cool. It actually kind of sounds like almost a little bit of what we got with the 2019 Hellboy movie, where they kind of leaned into some of the more monster slaying, like comedic, over the top violence kind of aspects of that universe. And that was just, that could have been, I think, its own series as well. So I really feel like this would be a good one to check out right after I watch The Deep House and play Dead by Daylight.
It's interesting that you brought up Hellboy, because I thought that would have been a perfect TV series for that format.
Oh yeah.
Like, I do like what they set up there. Yeah.
I mean, there's this, like, literally, like, with the big Mike Mignola, the comic book series, where you have, it's such an expanded universe now with the comic books that you like, every episode could just be a new case file. And then you could have those underlying, those underlying really big villains that are recurring. But it's so built for a TV series. It's kind of mind boggling that we haven't gotten that yet.
I certainly hope we do. Especially with Umbrella Academy doing so well at, with Netflix, and that's obviously a dark horse comic book series. Season 3 is coming out this year. I'm super excited for that.
We've been rewatching the first 2 seasons, and it's still just as enjoyable.
Yeah, it's a great show. It's super good. And then the other show I've been keeping up with is Boba Fett, like most of the world, I guess, because everybody's watching the Marvel and Star Wars shows for the most part. But I'm on, I don't know. I think I'm 1 episode back. So I think I saw the first 3 or 4. I can't remember where we're at. I lose track. But I've been enjoying Boba Fett. I know it seems to be a little polarizing online, but I know some people were saying that some of the episodes or some sequences in the episodes felt a little more like Spy Kids. And then I just, because I don't post to Twitter, but I just screamed out into the void. We had to live, we had to live through the prequels. Like, that was, we got Jar Jar. This is the same universe. So it's like Star Wars always has a tricky balance, specifically. Honestly, it always has. I think that some people may have like maybe misaligned views for what Star Wars is versus what they want Star Wars to be. Mm-hmm. I can understand that people may gravitate towards more some of the grittier stuff, and and I get it, right? Because you have the first, you have A New Hope, which brought everybody in. You have a huge percentage of the fan base that then gravitated towards Empire Strikes Back, which wasn't universally loved when it first came out. And then you had Return of the Jedi, which may not seem like it was polarizing, but it was, because you had it did take a very, more kid-friendly approach. And then, George Lucas just continued down that path. That's what we saw in the prequels. So I think maybe The Mandalorian does a better job of balancing that. Even though they have Baby Yoda, it still seems to be maybe more seriously approaching the material. And then the interesting thing is you have Boba Fett, who's, considered this badass character, but you do see some of the, I do feel like it's a little more lighter, adventure-y type episodes. So I think that balance has thrown people off. That being said, I've enjoyed every episode. And I might like some episodes better than others. I might like The Mandalorian a lot better than Boba Fett, but it's good. So I'm excited to see where they go with it.
Also, what's wrong with Spy Kids? I mean, come on. Like,
I figured Derek would take offense to that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, don't people remember like those giant finger monsters and how creepy that was? And like, to me, that was in some respects, that was a horrifying movie as a kid. But no, that's really interesting to hear. And the Book of Boba Fett too has the really daunting task of being like the first first Star Wars TV series to come out after the massive success of The Mandalorian. And I know that we have like 10 other spin-off series that are going to be coming out on Disney Plus, but this being like that first one, I think it's such a hard position to be in, because The Mandalorian was just kind of mostly universally loved and seen as this kind of like resurgence for the franchise that I feel like you're gonna always it's an easy spot to fail in the eyes of the fans. So I'm glad to hear that it's holding its own, and I'm really glad that they gave that character more than just like a one episode cameo in The Mandalorian, that we actually get to find out more about him, and especially since for as interesting a character as he was in the original trilogy, we saw him on screen for such little time, so that it's interesting that now all these years later we're getting an entire series about him and that world, that part of the Star Wars universe, which I think there's a lot more to explore there. So very interesting. I just want a Sarlacc pit spinoff too. Then give me the Sarlacc merch.
Oh, there's got to be merch. Got to be merch from the pit.
But aren't you just look like would a Sarlacc t-shirt just look like you're walking around with a big butthole on your shirt?
Probably.
Well, now that you mention it, yeah, that is true.
Not to say
I'll put together some concept art.
Not to say that there are people who wouldn't jump at that opportunity, but
there's a lot going on in that area of the Star Wars universe. So, but yeah, I don't know. As a kid, though, it always sounded so horrifying. Like, what is it, like 1,000 years to be digested? Like somehow you would live 1,000 years before being like completely digested, and then you're like, well, you'd actually probably just die after a couple of years. But it still sounded really painful.
Yeah, and they do some cool stuff with dealing with that, or talking about it in the show. I won't go into too many details, but yeah, they have some fun with that.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I think with that, we have given our listeners and each other some suggestions. In case anyone didn't hear part of this episode, Derek promised that he would open Dead by Daylight. He would put the disc into his PlayStation, and that he would attempt to install it. That's as far as the commitment goes. And we will follow up soon to see how it went. We want to thank Bryan, our engineer, for helping us out each and every episode. And as always, we want to thank our Corpse Club listeners, those who have signed up for a Corpse Club membership. We could not do this without you. So thank you very much for your support. Make sure to visit corpseclub.com. You can check out our backlog of episodes. You can sign up to become a member. We have member-only perks, including a Corpse Club t-shirt, a pin. You can pick an episode topic. You want us to talk about the Sarlacc pit for an entire episode? We could do it. Somehow we'll find a way. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Every rating and review helps, and you can find us on Google Play, YouTube, SoundCloud, and all of your favorite podcast providers. If you want to get in touch, you can reach out anytime. We're at contact@corpseclub.com. On Twitter, we're at Daily Dead News and at Corpse Club. And on Instagram and Facebook, we're under Corpse Club as well. Before I forget, I do want to remind our listeners to head over to dailydead.com. Heather Wixon is running our Sundance coverage. So if you want to hear about some of the latest horror movies that you should keep on your radar, Daily Dead and her coverage is the place to do it. And so make sure to check it out. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, stay scary.